What am I trying to say? Hey everyone, my name is Ryan and I'm back with another video. So I know book adaptations are a little bit of a hot topic in the community. Some people really love them and some people really hate them. I am someone who likes to check out book adaptations. You know, I kind of go into it knowing that it's not going to be perfect and knowing that things are going to be taken out from the original material, but I still think it's fun to see the book that I love be experienced in a new and exciting way. And I like seeing what adaptations have to offer. So today I have a list for you guys of all the books that I think would make really good adaptations. So with that, let's get into it. The first book I'm going to talk about today is the book that inspired me to make this video, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I actually have an individual review of this book on my channel, so I will link that on the screen. But, spoiler alert, I loved this book. This is a recent read for me, and it follows a girl named Bree whose mother has just died, and she goes to college to escape her grief, and there at college she gets wrapped up in this secret society that kind of revolves around like magic and King Arthur legends, and she ends up falling into a world of magic and demons and things like that, and learning that those things are more connected to her mother than she originally thought. I thought this book was amazing. I thought it was so good. I thought it did a really good job of weaving in real world discussions with the fantastical elements. And besides that, it was just a ton of fun. And with it being a lot of fun, that's one of the reasons why I want there to be an adaptation. I would love to see this play out on screen. I think we'd get a lot of good, like, demon fights and magic, and I think the special effects would be really cool to see. I would love for this to be a TV show done in sort of the style of like the CW. I know CW shows are kind of like cheesy and like teen drama type of deal, but honestly I think that would suit this really well because this gave me such nostalgic feelings for like classic teen fantasy stuff. So yeah, just if there was ever an adaptation of this, I would watch it and I hope I would love it. Next up is probably the book that I want an adaptation for the most, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book is essentially about a band called The Six and another music artist, her name is Daisy Jones, and it's the story of their rise to fame and them starting a career together in the 1970s rock scene and making this monumental album for their career, and then the subsequent story of them breaking up. The thing that I would really love about a movie for this is that this book is so rooted in the 70s rock scene. This book was all about just the whole, you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and people just being messy in everything and how fame just really messes with a person. I think that would be really interesting to see on screen, and I think it would be really interesting to see these characters come to life. In addition to that, the thing that I really want from an adaptation from this is a soundtrack. When I was reading this book, I really wanted to be able to hear these songs, and there are lyrics listed in the back of the book, but oh my god, I would love to hear the music that this band creates. And I think a movie would be a really good opportunity for there to be an additional soundtrack. So yeah, I really want a Daisy Jones movie, and I know I'm not the only one, so I'm hoping that we get one eventually. And there better be a soundtrack. The next book on this list is Jade City by Fonda Lee. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy series in a setting where jade is the ruling substance, and the more jade you have, the more powerful you are, and if you wear it or embed it into your skin, it gives you magical powers. Additionally, there is also a ruling family called the Calls, and they are basically in a clan war with another ruling family over who gets to have the most jade. And there's a lot of political intrigue and a lot of action, and that is why I think this would be an awesome adaptation. This isn't your typical fantasy series. Like, it takes place in a fantasy land called Kekon, but they have technology. You know, there's car chases and motorcycle chases and gunfights, and they have TVs. So it's not a high fantasy series like Lord of the Rings where there's like elves and wizards and swords and things like that. The thing about this book that I love is the balance of the political intrigue elements with the action elements. The action in here is amazingly written. There's martial arts, like fighting scenes, and really epic like car chases, and I think those would be awesome to see on screen. So yeah, this one's just really fast paced, and with the action scenes there is also a lot of political intrigue, so there would be an interesting plot to keep the adaptation going, and there's cool magic and there's cool characters, and I just can't see a reason for there not to be an adaptation. And the next book that I have is Death Prefers Blondes by Caleb Roehrig. And the reason I want an adaptation for this is because it is a heist book, but with drag queens. I freaking loved this book. I thought it was so cool and had so much action, but was freaking cool. Like, it had drag queens in it, and it was so much fun and so campy, and I think this would make an awesome movie. I'm imagining something in the vein of like Ocean's 8 and that type of thing, but with a little bit of a campy side, like how you would get action movies from like the early 2000s. Also, the costumes for this would be amazing. Like, I can already see it in my head. And yeah, I just want to see some drag queens do some cool fight scenes and some cool action scenes, and I think an adaptation for this book would be great. Alright, and next up is a little bit different, but I'll get into that, and that is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. And the reason why I say that this is a little bit different is because I don't necessarily want a movie from this. I mean, a movie wouldn't hurt. I would still watch it and probably love it if one was ever made, but similar to how I want a soundtrack for Daisy Jones, I want a podcast for this. This book is about a girl named Frances, and she is an artist, and she draws fan art for her favorite podcast, and eventually she meets a boy in her school, and they strike up a friendship, and eventually she learns that he is the creator of this podcast. There's a lot of bigger messages going on with this story about disillusionment and the pressure placed on teens to decide how their life is going to go from a really young age, and just how to figure out what you're going to do with your life. But one of the things that I really love about this book is that we get actual snippets of the podcast on page. And we see Aled and Frances coming up with ideas for the aesthetics for the characters and coming up with ideas for episodes. And I think it would be a really good opportunity to actually have episodes of this podcast released. And yeah, all I wanted to do when I was reading this book was listen to this podcast, and I couldn't do it because it doesn't exist, but I would love to be able to listen to it one day, so I hope we get that. And the final book that I have for today is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a novel in verse about a young girl named Xiomara, and she is Dominican, and she lives in New York, and she wants to be a poet. At the same time, she also has a strained relationship with her mother, because her mother is a very devout Catholic and wants Xiomara to make her confirmation, but Xiomara doesn't really understand a lot about Catholicism and doesn't really know how it would fit into her own life, and it's just the story of her wanting to be a poet and figuring out what her faith means for herself and things like that, and it's just a really beautiful story. I love this book. I actually read this book 3 different times in 2020, and I loved it each and every time. This is a novel in verse, and it has very, very beautiful writing, and it's very easy to read, and it's also very impactful. And while I think experiencing this story as a movie might take away some of the feeling and emotion that the reader gets from the very beautiful writing, I still do think that I would love a movie of this. I would love to see Xiomara and some of the other poet characters expressing themselves on screen, and there's certain scenes in here that I think would be so emotional to see. I think the things that I would most be looking forward to seeing would be scenes of Xiomara performing her work, and the scenes in the poetry club when they're all getting together and reciting poetry together, and the scenes of her experiencing first love for the first time with a boy named Aman, and of course the scenes with her mother. And because this is a standalone, and because it's a novel in verse, it's a quick read and it's only one book, so I don't think that they would have to cut much out of it if they were going to make it a movie. Overall, this is just a really beautiful story, and I love all the characters, and there's a really great female-female friendship in here, and there's just so many good things that I think not only make this book amazing, but would make an amazing movie as well. So yeah, that's all the books that I want adaptations for. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought of them down in the comments, and if there's any books that you want adaptations for, let me know that as well. But yeah, that's all that I have for you today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to smile. Bye!